All praise, all glory, all honors most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And peace to you in the name of his Son, the Messiah, the Christ, Jesus. It's always a blessing anytime that I can come before you to preach the word of God, and never ever do I count it as a light thing to do so. Last time I spoke with you, we touched upon the things that we're experiencing as a people, the death culture that we have adopted as a people, the death culture of homosexuality and abortion. Something I wanted to mention that I just didn't get around to because I just cut it short because I could have went on for another 2 hours, is the fact that even in the Nation of Islam, now you have what seems to be, at least from the leadership, the acceptance or the tolerance of homosexuality. You saw that with those who have that particular lifestyle preaching, or rather not preaching, but one was a minister, and one was a so-called Pan-Africanist. At the Million Man March, I saw both clips of the Million Man March years apart, and this particular individual is talking about inclusion. And then this year, Minister Farrakhan got up and said, well, you know, you really can't say anything about it because look at you and what you do. Okay. Now it is true that again, fornication, adultery, right, is no better than homosexuality when it comes to the word of God. But at the same time, you cannot tolerate that particular behavior. Okay. It just shows, you know, how our leadership is quite frankly ill-equipped. I know that might sound harsh, but that's the reality. We have a bunch of leaders leading us in the wrong direction, because I read to you last week about what true leaders of our people would lead us, where they would lead us. You know, I ever think about Minister Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam some years ago when he had that message, who are the real children of Israel? Okay. And then he kind of touched upon it and saying we're the children of Israel, the so-called African American, but then he goes in a different direction with the scriptures, right? A misinterpretation. And my only question is, if we're the children of Israel, why would we be dealing in Islam? Because that is the religion of Ishmael, okay, or of the Arabs, who also enslaved us. That is not what God gave to us, okay? That is falsehood. Islam is falsehood, okay? So we have people like the Minister Louis Farrakhan and Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and this vast number of false prophets coming to us claiming that they have the answers. Because if you know anything about our people, or just have your eyes open, you don't even have to live in America to see that the so-called African American, we have serious problems. We have serious problems. And our problems, you know, in this country, just in this sojourn, started when we first came here. When we first set our feet on the shores of this continent, our problems began. But you look at us right now, what is our problem? Economically, we're destitute. You go to some of these major metropolitan cities and you look at the true employment population ratio, which shows you the true unemployment rate. You're talking, for some segments of our people, it is 50%, right? You look at net median wealth. For a Caucasian family, it'd be roughly $111,000. For us, it's more like between $5,000 to $7,000. Even though, you know, we say we have a spending power of $1 trillion, but as soon as a black person gets a dollar, that dollar goes out of our community into another community. And furthermore, other people are in our communities like leeches, like parasites, sucking the economic life out of the community, while they live off the people, give us poor services and goods, mistreat us when we go into many of these marts and so forth, because many of us live in food deserts. So we have to go to the gas station for groceries, gas, bread, and oil, and cigarillos and everything else that's detrimental to us, and get mistreated, and we don't benefit from that. They come in our neighborhoods and sell us some more deaf culture with the type of hair that they sell our people, and the products to bleach our skin and to burn our scalp so we can look more European. Again, you know, you look at African American hair, that's a $1 billion industry of which we have practically no part of. People talk about Madam C.J. Walker, but when you look at what's going on right now, we don't control the industry at all, and we're being sold deaf. So economically, I mean, when you look at the fraud of the 2008 crisis and what happened to our people, we got suckered on all these mortgages, and prior to that, redlining, and prior to that, weren't able to live in certain areas. This is, even you look at places like Chicago, the history of Chicago, we couldn't live in certain areas, but then we'd be charged much more for homes that were of lower quality. You know, so even more so than the whites were, you know, who got a lot of their money and got a lot of their homes through the GI Bill. Right? So economically, think about how many businesses we own. We are not business owners. Last hired, first fired. You know, many of us, if we do have a job, we're working for the government. And these jobs are oftentimes some of the first ones to get cut. Right? So economically, we're destitute. You look at Detroit. You look at what's going on with our people in Detroit. You look at a lot of these major metropolitan areas and where we're at, we have been segregated to the ghettos. And now many of us are moving to the suburbs, and the suburbs are becoming the ghetto, and then other people are moving right back into the cities, right? So economically, we're destitute. Politically, we have more politicians than we ever had, and we have no political power. We have no power to sit up. We just happy to even be in the room where they're serving tea at the table of power. We're just happy to be there. You got a bunch of leaders who will sell our people out. You got a bunch of ministers right now meeting or having a meeting with Donald Trump, as if he is going to do something for our people. He's not going to do anything for our people. Obama didn't do anything for our people. Clinton didn't do anything for our people. Bush certainly didn't do anything for our people. What makes you think our answer is a political one? You know, we have these leaders who constantly tell us, well, you know, you need to vote. And if you don't vote, you can't say anything. Brothers and sisters, we've been voting for quite a while, and we've been catching hell. We've been voting, and that has not been the answer to our overall problem. But see, if you don't know the problem, you will say the problem is we need to vote. It's a political one. You will say the problem is we need to build our economic base, for our problem is economic. And socially, we already know how we're treated. We already know how we're treated. You have segments of our population who are engaged in civil disobedience and protesting and marching and screaming and yelling. But brothers and sisters, we've been doing that for quite a while. And I'm not mocking what's been done, because people have died, been to prison, gave up their livelihoods for the freedom of our people. And at the same time, a lot has changed. We still in the same condition. Why is that? Again, you have people coming with these answers, talking about revolution. You know, you got a lot of people talking about we need a revolution. Let me tell you something. We've tried that as well. And what did you have? You had our people being killed in the night by police after they had something slipped in their drink. You had them on trumped up charges. They rotting in jail right now, right? Because we thought, well, that's the issue. We looked at what Mao Zedong did and said, hey, we need a revolution. Or we looked at Fidel Castro and said we need a revolution. But like Malcolm said, man, if you knew what revolution was, you wouldn't even talk. You wouldn't even say the word, because revolution is bloody, and you're not prepared for that. You're not prepared for that. Brothers and sisters, our problem is not that we need a revolution. Our problem is not a political one, that we need to vote. Our problem is not an economic one. I'm talking about the root of the problem. See, if you don't know the problem, you cannot come up with the true viable solution, which is what so many of these so-called leaders and ministers do. They say, we have the answer. I have the answer. Come follow me. And it doesn't work out. Because, brothers and sisters, the problem is not with some other people. Yes, God has used other people as a hammer to beat us down because we have sinned against our God. That is the problem. See, we are the children of Israel. We are the people of the book. That makes us different. I'm talking to so-called African American. Here in this context of America, the so-called African American. Yes, we are other places scattered out throughout the Americas, throughout the islands, throughout Asia, the Middle East, even and Africa. But we are different from everybody else on the planet. Let me just read how we're different. I'm going to read some scriptures to you and see why we in the condition that we are in. This is Amos. This is Amos 3 and verse 1. It says, hear this word that the Lord has spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquity. And how has he punished us? He's punished us through captivity, we'll read. See, brothers and sisters, we've been fed a pack of lies, been miseducated in these killing fields they call schools. We've been told that we are just Negroes and that they found us and that they brought us over here. And then, well, hold on, that is true. But we had a history prior to 1619. We had a history prior to the transatlantic slave trade. Our history is written in scripture. Our history, brothers and sisters, is written in scripture. And if you don't see our history, this Bible is telling us our history is telling us who we are. If you don't know who you are, you don't know what you should do. See, we've been told we're less than. We've been told that we are coons and jigaboos. We've been told that we're N-words. But brothers and sisters, we are the children of God. We are the children of Israel. We are the people who, and the only people on the planet whom God manifested himself to directly. And if anybody else wants to get to God, they got to come by this way. That might sound arrogant, but that's the truth. That's why Jesus said, salvation is of the Jews. Who are the true Jews? Because if you understand what I'm saying, it might sound odd. Because you say, wait a minute, what about the people in the land? The people of Israel are black people, the Israelis, brothers and sisters. You don't read about an Israeli in this book. But what you do read is this. This is Revelation 2 and 9. He says, I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. See, brothers and sisters, when he's talking about, I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, he's talking to the children of Israel, the true children of Israel who are black people that have been scattered into slavery all over the world. This is the black Messiah. These are his words, who had hair like wool and feet like the color of burned brass. He was an Israelite of the tribe of Judah. He was a black man, looked like all the Israelites who were all black people then and now. But we got some people who claiming to be the Jew, who have taken the identity of us. And he says, I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. How are you in poverty and rich at the same time? That's talking about the true Israelites, because we are rich spiritually, because again, we are different from every other people on the planet, in that it was our forefathers that God manifested himself unto. It was our people whom God came down and made a covenant with. And therefore, when we broke the covenant and continued to sin against him, the terms of the covenant will read with that we be cast into slavery. I'm gonna read because it's a solution to this. But he said again, I know thou works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. That's why Paul said, what advantage doth hath the Jew much chiefly, and what profit is there of circumcision? Again, what advantage doth have the Jew, and what profit is there of circumcision? Much chiefly in every way, for unto them were committed the oracles of God. We just read in Amos, only you have I known of all the nations of the earth. I also quoted, salvation is of the Jews. But again, who are the true Jews? See, they're in the ghettos in Brooklyn and Baltimore. They're in the ghettos of Detroit and Newark. They're in the ghettos of Chicago and parts of Los Angeles. Hoods of Houston, that's where they at. In the wards in New Orleans, that's where they at. Refugees in their own so-called country, 3/5 of a human being. That's who the true Israelites are. So he said, I know that works in tribulation of poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them would say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. You don't see Judaism in this Bible. To be a Jew meant that someone was from the tribe or the kingdom of Judah. Judeans, brothers and sisters. Jesus was a Jew, not because he practiced Judaism. He was a Jew because he was from the tribe of Judah, brothers and sisters. Which we have been told in Genesis 49 that out of Judah would come that one, Shiloh, to whom it is or to whom it belongs. Eyes red like wine, teeth white with milk. Right, they're going to ask, talking about Jesus. Even back then, the one we call Jesus, even back then, was a Jew or Judean from the tribe of Judah. He wasn't someone that practiced Judaism. But see, you have some people who have taken the identity of the Israelite, of the true Jews. And he calls it blasphemy. He calls it blasphemy. But it was written that we would lose our identity. And I'm going through this because if you don't understand this, you can't understand the solution I'm about to talk about. First, we need to deal with the problems, how we got in a situation, what's going on spiritually, from a spiritual perspective. We see it with our natural eye, but something's going on behind the scenes, and it has been going on. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28. Just go to Deuteronomy 28. Because here are the terms that God put forth on the table. And even when you really understand, this was Jesus talking to Israel back then before he came in the flesh. But he says in Deuteronomy 28 and 15, this is Moses. Now, this is even before Israel, again, a black people that have been scattered into slavery, before Israel even goes into the land. He says, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So you're going to be cursed. This is what he said. He said, cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. So wherever you go, you're going to be cursed. Look at our sojourn here in this forsaken place called America. Look at this place. If you haven't noticed, it's going down here. Straight to hell. That's where it's headed. When I'm saying hell, I mean devastation, a crumbling empire. That's what's happening. If you haven't been paying attention. You read it, and that many Tekel Upharsin. The handwriting is on the wall. The cup of iniquity is reaching its brim. Come out of her spiritually. Come out of her. Turn back to God. That's what we need to do. But he said, wherever you go, you're going to be cursed in the city. You're going to be cursed in the field. Look at us. Many of our people who were brought here were brought, even though slavery initially was throughout even parts of the north. It ended up being largely in the south, for the agriculture. In the south, in the fields, toiling, picking cotton, tobacco, rice. We did these things. And what happened? We were, even after slavery, we were in economic destitution, sharecropping. And what do many of us do? A lot of that younger generation will move up north for opportunity, for greater opportunity to get a job. And then they bring their relatives up north, one by one, from Alabama, from Mississippi, from Arkansas. And then what happened? In a place like Harlem and Chicago and Detroit, Boston, what happened? We were mistreated in one place and got to the north and were mistreated again. Isn't that what Malcolm said? You in the South as long as you below the Canadian border. You know, we were, and still are being mistreated in these urban areas. Look at all the police brutality. Look at all the segregation. Look at the public housing and then gentrification, being pushed out of places. 1 minute it's a slum with housing projects. The next minute you got a sign on it saying $2.5 million condominiums, which the former inhabitants of that area cannot afford. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Then he says, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. I talked about the economic destitution of our people. So you're going to be cursed wherever you go, right? Even we move into a neighborhood, people look at us and they want to move out immediately. Then our property value goes down, and then we have to go follow behind some more white people. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. He said, cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind and the flocks of thy sheep. So everything you have is going to be cursed. Again, this happened. See, this just didn't happen just now. It's been happening. It happened every time we sinned against God. It was a perpetual cycle of sin. The children of Israel were sin, then they get punished, then they cry out to God, he delivered them, then they sin some more to the point where we just got kicked out of the land totally. We're going to read that. But he says, our kids, the fruit of our body will be cursed. Look at our children. Look at the condition of our children. These are the ones who are graduating 50%, have 50% graduation rates. These are the ones who fill the juvenile detention centers. These are the ones that have you locking your doors at night. These are the ones that are like uncultivated fields, but you have not nourished them. You have not given them what they need, which is the word of God to learn how to live. More so than some new Jordans. These are the ones cussing out grown folks and attacking older people. These are the ones who the young people talk about how they're so savage. These are the ones that are shooting each other in the streets like dogs. These are the ones that don't value life. See, again, we dropped the ball. We dropped the ball. A lot of it is not their fault. We dropped the ball because, again, a father, when you read the scripture, one duty of a father is to teach his sons, to teach his children in general, to be the spiritual head of his household, and to teach his children what thus saith the Lord, so they can teach their children what thus saith the Lord. Teach them the laws, the statutes, the commandments of God, so they know how to behave themselves. Right? But we're the ones who, as men, have abandoned our families. We've abandoned our families and left our children to fend, and our women to fend for themselves. But so he says, I'm gonna skip down a little bit. He says in 28, verse 28, and I advise you to read Deuteronomy 28 in its entirety, because the first part of it deals with the good part. If we would the blessings that we would have experienced had we not sinned against God. Verse 28, it says, the Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. That's how we are. That's how we are. We're mad. High blood pressure from stress. Psychologically tormented from racism and white supremacy. People talk like it's so good now for black people. And what y'all complaining about? It's hell for black people. And it's been hell for black people. He says, and thou shalt grope in noonday as the blind groping in darkness.
and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. See, we are in the dark when it comes to this. And we got some old blind ministers and teachers and leaders talking about this way. They blind themselves and they leading us. You know where they end up. They leading us into ditch after ditch after ditch, right? How are you going to be a minister? I go back to that. How are you going to be a minister? You call yourself a minister, a leader of the people, and you are a proponent of homosexuality and same-sex marriage. How are you going to be a leader of our people and you saying, come on, let's follow Donald Trump? You've lost your mind. We've lost our mind for following these people. Well, we keep following them. How are you going to be a leader and you give your people Scientology? Yes, I'm talking about you. You giving them Scientology. Come on, let's lead them to L. Ron Hubbard. Then you're going to equivocate and try to twist it. But no, you sold our people out. You sold our people out. And that's what these leaders have done. No man shall save thee. You even had, again, you had some legitimate leaders in the past. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about in the past. And they didn't have the answer either. And they were sincere, but they didn't have the answer either because they don't know the problem. You see. So it said you're going to grope in darkness at noonday. When it's supposed to be bright outside, you're going to grope like one in dark. You ain't going to know what's going on. You're going to act backwards. And that's how we are, backwards as a people. And it said, no man shall save thee. No man's going to get you out of this condition. In verse 30, he says something here. He says, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. He says, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. I just want to read something to you. I just want to read something to you. This is from A People's History of Florida, How African Seminoles, Women, and Lower Class Whites Shaped the Sunshine State on page 312. It says Sam Everett of Mulberry, Florida, recalled. Now these are accounts of slaves and what they said. He says, on this plantation were more than 100 slaves who were mated indiscriminately. They didn't care, and without any regard for family unions, because they just wanted to breed us like cattle. It says that master thought that a certain man or woman might have a strong, healthy offspring. He forced them to have sexual relations, even though they were married to other slaves. If there seemed to be any slight reluctance on the part of either of the unfortunate one, Big Jim would make them consummate this relationship in his presence. He used the same procedure if he thought a couple were not producing children fast enough. Now listen to this. He enjoyed these orgies very much and often entertained his friends in this manner. Quite often, he and his guests would engage in these debaucheries, choosing for themselves the prettiest of the young women. Sometimes, listen to this, sometimes they forced the unhappy husbands and lovers of their victims to look on. That's A People's History of Florida, 1513 to 1876, How African Seminoles, Women, and Lower Class Whites Shaped the Sunshine State. See, that's what we've experienced in this country. I want to read something to you from this book, Killing Black Innocence, the program to control African American reproduction from slavery's end to the present day self-inflicted genocide. Let me just read something else to you, because this is how we've been treated here in this country. This is how we've been treated here in this country. I just want to read something to you real quick. Real quick. It says, according to Sam and Louisa Everett, husbands were required to watch their slaves, watch as their wives were raped. Okay. It says rape is an act of power. Rape, it reinforced the subjugation of the female slave. It also served to emasculate the male slave who was unable to protect his mother, wife, sister, or daughter. All right. This is what happened to us. Our women, our wives were even taken. Let me read something else here. This is from another book, Into Egypt Again with Ships. a message to the forgotten Israelites. I want to read something here that was said by a slave owner. If you'll bear with me. Because this, brothers and sisters, is something we experience as a people. Now, this is from John Newton, Thoughts Upon the African Slave Trade, 1788. All right. It says on page 37 of this book, this debauchery of the female slave occurred even before these wives, daughters, and mothers reached the shores of America. John Newton, the famous slave trader turned clergyman and abolitionist, writes the following concerning rape on board slave ships. Because again, we said, thou shalt betroth a wife and another man shall lie with her. That's not talking about, oh, she gonna just commit adultery on you and just step out on you. No, it's something talking about a man coming through the front door, telling you to get out. Or in these cases that we read in 2 accounts, that the man was forced to watch. But see, Moses told us that. He says, what were going on these ships. Understand, these women that they were bringing on ships, and it's not like they weren't married. Many of them, it's not like that many of them weren't betrothed to men before they were captured. It says, when the women and girls are taken on board a ship, naked, trembling, terrified, they are often exposed to the wanton rudeness of white savages. In imagination, the prey is divided upon the spot and only reserved till opportunity offers. So they raping women. They were raping our women on the ship. Like they're the savages. They're the savages. And even you had what they call the bed warmers. They call them our women, and even bed wenches. Right? And then next thing you know, they got little so-called mulatto children running around. Then they'd have to sell them. We're gonna get to that too. You know. And now what do we see now? Now it's okay. Now we got Olivia Pope as the modern day bed wench. That's all that is. That's all that is. So it said, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. So you're going to work and toil, and you're not going to benefit from your efforts. We built the country. Not only did we build the country, the financial institutions of this country were founded upon our labor. You look at J.P. Morgan. You look at many of these banks and these insurance companies and some of these railroad companies across this country. They were even the stock market. We were the stock. We are the basis for the economic foundation of this country. You talking about taking insurance out on slaves. We built the railroads. We built the White House. We built the South, picked billions of tons of cotton. Not one reparation. Didn't get reparations. But we actually, so you wouldn't have the United States of America. So when people talk about, what we've done, and then other people talk crazy, like get over it, man, we built the country. And if you really, really tried to pay us, you can't pay for what was done to our people. You simply cannot do it. But if you tried to pay for it, you literally have to give up the whole country. I'm talking everything in it. That's what you have to do. And it still will not be enough. I'm for real. You can't really pay us in reparations as far as monetarily. That's how high the cost is. In verse 32, it says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. I'm going to go to this book again, into Egypt again with ships, because our children were sold. Our children were sold. This is from a book called Slavery and the Domestic Slave Trade in the United States, in a series of letters addressed to the Executive Committee of the American Union for the Relief and Improvement of the Colored Race, 1836, page 147. Now it says in America on page 39 of this book, it says in America, which is our focus, children of slaves were sold at the financial impulse of the slave master. Consequently, families were often torn apart. Many members never seeing their loved ones again. In the work of slavery and the domestic slave trade in the United States, Professor Andrews' Inquiry of a Slave Trader sheds light. It says on verse 32, because that's the verse we're reading here in the scriptures. It says, now this is Andrews speaking, right? He says, do you buy the wife without the husband? So he's talking to a slave trader. The slave trader says, yes, very often and quite frequently too. They sell me the mother while they keep the children. I have often known them take away the infant from his mother's breast and keep it while they sold her. Okay, so that's in that book. Killing Black, go back to this one. Killing Black Innocence. Killing Black Innocence. Let me read something to you about the selling of children. Because this book talks a lot about how we were bred. This is on page 8 of this book, which has over 100 references. It says, Amy Elizabeth Patterson, a mulatto slave who was sold by her father, described this misdeed in the following words. That was the greatest crime ever visited on the United States. It was worse than the cruelty of overseas, worse than hunger. But when a father can sell his own child, humiliate his own daughter by auctioning her on the slave block, what good could be expected where such practices were followed? Yes, slavery is a curse to this nation, a curse which still shows itself in hundreds of homes where mulatto faces are evidence of a heinous sin and proof that there has been a time when American fathers sold their children at the slave marts of America, because that's what that was in consequence to the rape that was done. So the rape, the product of that rape was oftentimes a mulatto child. That child, when that white mistress see that baby, the shame comes upon her. Then the child will be sold. But not just that, man, they put us on auction blocks and then they just sell our children and separate husbands and wives, and nothing they could do. You see, even Sojourner Truth had in her speech, her famous speech, Ain't I Woman, she talked about how when she was she worked just as hard as any man as a slave, and then she saw most of her children. She had a lot of kids, and she saw most of them sold from her. And nobody heard her cries but Jesus. Nobody heard her cries but God. But understand, this was written of in scripture. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. We even saw that in Roots. We saw that in Roots. Nothing you can do. Selling your children, nothing you can do. Let's go down to verse 37. It says, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Who has more racial epithets than us? Who has more looking at us and looking and shaking of the head than us? You want to see how people really feel about us? Let's look at social media. Look at some of these YouTube comments and see what people are saying in anonymity or anonymously. You will see how they feel about us as a people. Verse 41, thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Now, why is all this happening? Here it is. This is verse 45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. See, we didn't listen. We kept sinning against God. So therefore, our works were not prosperous. See, we're not in this condition because, the problem is we need to vote. We're not in this condition because, the problem is we need to go to some white man's institution and be educated, or some black institution that's run by white folks and be educated, or controlled by white folks. No, that's not what we need. I'm not saying you don't need some type of education. What I'm saying is that's not our problem. Our problem is not that power grows out of the barrel of a gun. So therefore, we need to pick up arms and destroy this man. I'm not saying that we don't need to defend ourselves, but I'm not saying that I'm saying that's not the answer. That's not the answer. Because ultimately, if God fights your battles, you cannot lose. You don't even have to pick up a weapon. Spiritually, if we get in tune with our God, and I'm telling you something else, you can have all the weapons. And if you are not in tune with God, you're going to lose. You see, so we're in a state of spiritual darkness, spiritual decadence. We're totally out of pocket, and it's so bad because again, we are the ones who are supposed to be teaching the rest of the sons of Adam about God. We are the ones who everybody else is supposed to look to for righteousness amongst people. But see, so we can't go out in our spiritual state right now and go on and conquer. You're not gonna conquer anything. You're not gonna conquer anything. So it says, and they shall be talking about these curses, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So if you want to know who the children of Israel are, who fits the curses? Who had their children sold? Who built and didn't reap? Who's economically destitute? Who had their wives taken from them and raped? Who's called all these bywords and proverbs? Let's read something else. Now, if you don't see this, I can't help you. Might as well get off this channel. This is verse 64. It says, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth, even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. That's why we're in these so-called Christian churches, worshiping falsely. It's 2015. Negroes still celebrating Christmas and Easter. Man, get a clue. An encyclopedia will tell you that stuff is pagan. Still going to church on Sunday when the Bible says the Sabbath is the day of rest. Get a clue. Believing in the Trinity, that's pagan. Get a clue. Wake up. Wake up out of your sleep. This is some coffee for you. You're drunk. So it says, and among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. That's how we are even until this day. When the slave patrols was riding around, that's how we were. When the KKK came around and the Black Legion came around, white supremacists, or when slave master came around and the overseer came around, that's how we were. Let the police run upon you today. That's how we are. But we stay talking about we have some rights. Okay, they showing you your rights. Killing you in the street and getting off. Asking you for your ID and then shooting you for getting it. Choking you out over some cigarettes. Torturing you in Chicago in some building nobody knows about. Electrocuting your testicles. That's what the police were doing in Chicago. Raping your women in Oklahoma. You think that's the only place that was going on? Brothers and sisters, understand that sexual misconduct is one of the top complaints against police officers. Who do you think experiences that the most? Our African American women. So-called African American women, I might add, because we're not African Americans. So it says, in the morning thou shalt say with God it will even, and at even thou shalt say with God it will morning. For the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. Now, again, I'm going to read something to you right now. If you don't see, I'm going to ask you, if you can't see this, I'm going to ask you just to turn this off. And go be lost in the sauce somewhere. Go and float off and ride off into the sunset and go find you some Nicki Minaj to listen to, or some or some Drake, or do something. I'm not really proposing that you go listen to that foolishness. What I'm saying is this is clear. If you don't know this is talking about the so-called African American, I really can't help you. So it says, oh, you really don't have an ear to hear what the word of God is saying to you. If it says in verse 68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Egypt, when we read in scripture, is described as the house of bondage. So here Moses is not telling us literally that you're going to go into Egypt by way of a ship, but rather you're going into the house of bondage, because Egypt was our first bondage. You're going to the house of bondage by way of slave ships. It says, whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bond men and bond women, and no man shall buy you. So you're going to go into slavery by way of slave ships, and no man is gonna buy you. In other words, how's that? You're gonna be sold into slavery, but no man's gonna buy you, meaning nobody's gonna save you. See, as great as Martin was, he didn't do it. W.B. Du Bois didn't do it. Marcus Garvey didn't do it. Booker T didn't do it. Elias Malik El-Shabazz didn't do it. Fred Hampton didn't do it. Stokely Carmichael. You talking brilliant men. You talking about brilliant men that didn't do it, was sincere, that didn't do it. You know they didn't do it because we still over here, captive. We have no land. We have no sovereignty. We are a nation without these things. And you can't be a nation fully without sovereignty and land. And that's what God, our God of Israel, that's what he gave us. He gave us sovereignty and land. He gave us a constitution, which is the Torah or the law. That's what he gave us. Then we conquered the land and took it. But he said, you're going into slavery. And you see that? I don't know if you can see the slave ship. I don't know if you can see the slave ship. Let me find another picture of the slave ships. Maybe you can see them here. You see that? There you go. There you go. That's the Brooks slave ship. This one right here is the slave deck of the the slave deck of the bark Wildfire, June 2nd, 1860. Slaves. He said, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and then you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. We still over here. None of these African tribes came back to get us. They said, give us our people. No, they didn't. But see, we don't know who we are. We don't know who we are. This is Deuteronomy 32 and 26. It says, I said I would scatter them into corners. I would make the remembrance of them, talking about Israel, to cease from among men. We've forgotten who we are. How you going to be a Negro? A Negro is just, it means black. You've been Negro, colored, then African American. First of all, America, that word comes from Amerigo Vespucci in Italian. In Africa, there are a lot of, let's just say the simplest one, because there are a couple theories on that. Let's just say Africa's a continent. Africa's a continent with about, what, 54 countries? Which one are you from? Which one are you from? Everybody in Africa is not the same. It's the most diverse continent on the planet. Yeah, everybody's not the same. Hundreds and hundreds of languages, many types of religion, many types of people. Which one are you from? People, somebody from Europe, they don't say I'm a European American. They say, no, I'm an Italian in America, or Italian American, if they want to put that American on the back of it. But they know they know they're Italian. They know they're Italian. I'm Japanese American. They came from Japan. They know they from, they don't claim all of Asia. They narrow that down, but we can't narrow it down because we've lost our identity. And then to compound it, but it said we would lose our identity. But to compound it, even we got another people here, they claiming to be who we are. And that's blasphemy. You even think about the indigenous of this country, the so-called Indian, so-called Native American, who were treated terribly, who genocide, the program of genocide was put forth on them, right? They still know who they are. They could tell you what tribe they're from, and even some of them own slaves, these so-called civilized tribes. They even own slaves. Not all of them, because a lot of them, they took in slaves, runaway slaves. So I'm not putting that on all indigenous people. What I'm saying is, even with that, they knew who they were. You see. Let's go to Deuteronomy 21, because the curse is on us. And if you don't believe the curse, I'm going to read something that was on us. Because I read this to people and they get real offended. You mean we cursed? I'm not saying it's like that that misinterpretation of what happened to Ham with Shem, Ham, and Japheth and Noah when Ham saw the nakedness of his father, and then he cursed Canaan. Because that was used. The Talmud and then the reinterpretation of that was used to perpetuate the idea that we curse because of our color, and therefore we should be slaves. White people put that forth. No, I'm not saying that, because people get offended. You know, I'm not saying we inferior. I'm not saying we less than. I even hear lost Negroes say, man, slavery was sure good for us because it exposed us to Christianity. What are you talking about? The first followers of the Messiah were black people. White people didn't expose us to anything. We exposed it to them. We gave them everything they got when it comes to religion, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to civilization. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Jesus was black. The Israelites were black. And when Paul went through the Gentiles, when you read what Paul went to these various places and put forth the gospel, that was white people being exposed to it. Paul was mistaken for what? An Egyptian, we read in what? Acts 21 or Acts 17. One of the two. So, I believe it's Acts 21. I just want to verify that because I want to give you the verse because I don't want you to be, I don't want to leave that untied. I want to tell you that. So that's, you know, they didn't, you know, you hear a lot of foolishness. You hear a lot of foolishness from our people. Let me read it real quick. Because again, I don't want to leave anything untied. Yeah, that's Acts 21 verses 37 through 39. Acts 21 verses 37 through 39. And as Paul was led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? Art not thou that Egyptian? Right? No, he told him, man, he said, I'm Paul. I'm a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. Said he was a Jew. He was a Jew. He was specifically from the tribe of Benjamin, but he called himself a Jew because he was from the southern portion. Because the southern kingdom was made up of Benjamin, Judah, and then Levi was even in there, spread out. Okay. Let me go back because I digressed. Deuteronomy 21. Deuteronomy 21. Deuteronomy 21. Because the sign is on you, brothers and sisters. You don't think you cursed by God? Deuteronomy 21 and 23 says, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree. Well, let me read verse 20. And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be to be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day, for he that is hanged is accursed of God. You think about what happened to Jesus. He was hanged on the tree. That was a lynching. That would be comparable to a lynching. What happened to Jesus? The crucifixion was a lynching. He was hanged on a tree. He took upon a curse that was supposed to be upon us, upon himself. We have a curse. I'm talking about for mankind. We have a curse on us as a people. He that is hanging on a tree is the cursed of God. You have to ask yourself the question, who's been hanging on all these trees? Who's been hanging on all these trees? Is it not us? Is it not us? I'll read something else to you. Read something else to you. Read something else to you about being hanged on trees. Please bear with me. Read something else to you. Because it's definitely talking about us. It's definitely talking about, look, I just want to show you these pictures. Look. Negroes for sale. That's us. Well, that's what they called us. That's what they called us. Because what I want to read, I have to read it in another place. Here it is. This is from the Tuskegee Institute lynching inventory. It says from 1865 to 1965, more than 6,000 African Americans died in racial violence in the United States. This inventory includes the names of 2,400 of the African Americans who were lynched in the United States from 1865 to 1965. So this is It says the inventory is necessarily incomplete, records are scant. So this is another reference, but it gets, I think, down further. It talks about the Tuskegee Lynching Institute lynching inventory. Oh no, this actually, forgive me, this is from a book. The Tuskegee Institute lynching inventory began in 1882, just before the great surge of lynchings that occurred around the turn of the century. Okay, so you got all these people, our people, that were lynched. And Tuskegee Institute called it the lynching century, because you had so many of our people in that 100 years or so, roughly 100 years or so, that were lynched, brothers and sisters. He said, he that is cursed, the curse of God hangeth on a tree. How do you think? Who is that talking to? What was Billie Holiday talking about? Strange fruit. What was she talking about? Born in the Southern breeze. She's talking about us. She's talking about what happened to us. See, it's also in this book. This is meant to begin with ships. He that is cursed of God hangeth on the tree. Let me read. I'm gonna read. This is what I was looking for here. This is from Tuskegee Institute lynching inventory. This is on page 26 of this book. I don't know if you can see it or not. It says, so if the accursed of God truly are hanged on trees, are not the so-called African Americans also accursed? African Americans have been hanged by the thousands in the United States between 1882 and 1968. That's the lynching century. The Tuskegee Institute recorded 4,743 lynchings in the United States. During this lynching century, the hearts of many African Americans trembled as they lived in fear of being lynched. However, this omnipresent terror and sadism cannot be conveyed by mere statistics. All right. I'm going to just read a little bit further. It says, one of the most poignant personal accounts of lynching in America was written by James Cameron, a lynch mob survivor. Now, he survived the lynching right there in Marion, Indiana. That was a place I used to drive by and even had to drive through going to school. He said, Cameron writes, and that was in what, 1930 or so? He said, Cameron writes in his book, A Time of Terror, of the pervasive terrorism blacks faced. In this chilling memoir, he recalls that even as a young teen, he was fully aware of the savagery involved in lynching. In gory detail, he describes the castration of black men fastened to trees and used as target practice by their assailants. That's it. To begin with ships. So we are the accursed of God, brothers and sisters. How do we get, though, from being in the land to being sold by way of slave ships? Let's go to somewhere. I want to take you there. Then we'll get to the solution. Because you got to break all that down. If you don't know the problem, you can't come up with the solution. That's just like if you practice in medicine. You can't, and you know, I come in with an illness. If you don't know what the problem is, you can't give me, you might cover up some symptoms, what these quack doctors often do. You know, give you an inhaler and tell you have asthma. But then you find out you really don't have asthma. I know 4 people that's happened to in my family. So I'm just giving an example. You know, if you don't know what the problem is, one of them, the doctor told her, she asked the blank, she said, do I have asthma? She said, you know, you might have asthma and you might not. That's like these so-called Negro leaders, you know, but they're just saying you need to vote. You got asthma. When in actuality, it's not asthma. When in actuality, it's pneumonia. You see, this is Luke 21. We're going to read something that the Lord said about his people. He says, and when ye shall see, this is Luke 21 and 20, and when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is now. Destruction is on the horizon. Right? He even looked at the city of Jerusalem and wept over it. This is verse 24. It says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, talking about Israel. And they shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down to the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So we not of our land. And he told us, he said, you better flee when you see this. So what is he talking about? Let's go back to this book. Let's go back to this book. Well, you know what? Let me say this, because let me say this just to make it plain. When we fled, we weren't fleeing into Europe. We fled into Africa, and we fled into the African interior, and we dwelt amongst those people for years, right? Which is something you read about in the scriptures we did quite often, going back into Egypt, trying to go back into Egypt, going into different places. And when the transatlantic slave trade occurred, we were the most susceptible to being sold because we were strangers among these people. Yes, we were all people of color, black people, but we were not all the same. That's why I asked the question earlier, which country are you from? I'm kind of cutting this out because I need to wrap this up, because I'll go on and on and on. And so it's no coincidence when you look at Africa right now. What do you see? You see people who are saying, yes, we are Israelites. We are the children of Israel in Africa today. The remnants of them, many of them were sold, but some of them were still in Africa. You think it's a coincidence that many of us came, they got us, many of us in West Africa? When you look at West Africa, what do you see? The Igbo, right? You see who they say, many of them saying, yeah, we Israelites. You got all kind of people, Yoruba, you got all kind of people, Limba, even Beta Israel. People talk about whether they are or not. My point is, you have people throughout Israel. How you have all these people throughout Africa who say that they're the Israelites? Many of them in West Africa. Even when you read certain books, like Hebrewisms of West Africa, it talks about the Ashanti. Right? You look at where we came from and where they got us from, and then look at these high pockets of people who saying they Israelites. You think it's a coincidence that when you look on YouTube right now, you got all these Negroes. Now, whether they off or not, I'm not talking about that, but you got so many so-called Negroes who you think are just Negroes or just some N-words saying, hey, we Israel. You think that's a coincidence? No, that's us coming back into who we are. That's us awakening before the second coming of the Messiah. That's what's happening. Look on YouTube right now, type in Black Israelites or Hebrew Israelites, and what you're going to see? You're going to see a lot of people throughout the country, throughout different parts of this world, saying, yeah, we Israelites. It's kind of like you can't put that back in the bag, that cat back in the bag. So what do we need to do as a people? So the Bible tells us who we are, even though we were lost. See, people kick at this like the white man's book. Man, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. This is not the white man's book. Yeah, some white man put it in different translations in different languages. That's true. But you think a white man put it like, if it's his totally, he would say that Jesus is black? That, yeah, all these Israelites, they mistaken for Egyptians, and that the Lord gonna make war with the Gentiles who white people are Gentiles. They the sons of Japheth. That he gonna make war with them when he come back. Well, let me just read. Let me give you an example, man. I can go all day. This is Joel. I just want to read something real quick. So this white man's book, he put this in here. This is Joel 3 and verse 1. It said, for behold, in those days and in that time when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, see, the Lord is going to redeem his people. He said, I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, a part of my land. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. Lord coming back, he telling the Gentiles will claim war. He gonna make war with the Gentiles when he come back. These are Europeans. He gonna destroy them. He said, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. This is verse 9. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. He's talking to Gentiles. So Gentiles are white people. So this is a white man's book. He said, I know the blasphemy of them would say they are Jews and they're not, but a synagogue of Satan. This is the white man's book. This book is telling you that the people are the slave, telling you about the slave trade, and it's telling you also that all the nations of the earth on you have unknown. He's telling you you're a peculiar treasure unto me. This the white man's book? No, it's not. No, it's not. But let's get to the solution, because that's what, so we know the problem. The problem is that we the children of God, that he made a covenant with, and that we sinned against our God. Now, what's the solution to the problem? Let's go to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, because here, this is Solomon's prayer of dedication. When he dedicated the temple, and he made a prayer. And this prayer, we're going to find this, it was divinely confirmed. This is what he said. It said in 2 Chronicles 6 and 36. Or 35. Or 36. If they sin, talking about the people, Israel, if they sin, this is verse 36. If they sin against thee, for there is no man which sinneth not, and thou be angry with them and deliver them over before their enemies, and they carried them away captives unto a land far off or near. That's what happened to us. Be carried to the Caribbean, carried to the Americas, north and south, carried throughout the world in slavery. Listen to what he said in verse 37. This is the solution. It says, yet if they bethink themselves in the land whither they are carried captive, and turn and pray unto thee in the land of their captivity, saying, we have sinned, we have done amiss, and have dealt wickedly. If they return to thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, whither they have carried them captives, and pray toward their land which thou gavest unto their fathers, and toward the city which thou hast chosen, and toward thy house which I have built for thy name, then hear thou from the heavens, even from thy dwelling place, and their prayer and their supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive thy people which have sinned against thee. So he said, we acknowledge our sin as a people, we turn back to him, and if we pray toward the city, that land, and even the city, the place where we've been cast out for, the same city that Jesus wept over, the city of the great king, which is Jerusalem, the city of peace. Understand, that's what Daniel did in his captivity. He acknowledged the sin of the people, his people Israel, and he prayed toward Jerusalem. That's what got him put in the promise. In the lion's den. Then you have these ministers, they preach. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, and they never tell you why he was thrown in the lion's den. Because he was doing what he normally did 3 times a day, praying toward Jerusalem. Let me just read that to you. I don't want to leave anything untied. Because, one thing Daniel did, again, he would pray and acknowledge the sin of his people. But this is what he did. It says in Daniel 6 and 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, because he had some other people who were jealous of his exaltation and his promotion for his wisdom that came from God, they set up a plan. They said, to Darius, who was king at the time, if we're gonna make a decree that nobody would ask any petition of anybody but you. But he a man of God, so he praying to God. That's who he make his petition to. So it says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. He wasn't thinking about these people. Okay? He wasn't thinking about them. You see. So that's just something on Daniel. And so he says in 2 Chronicles 6, if we bethink ourselves, if we acknowledge our sin, if we return to God, right? Not this pagan Christianity that we've been given by these slave masters, but turn to God. How are we going to go to them? But then he said, you be serving gods of wood and stone in the lands I carry you captive. That's what they gave us, gods of wood and stone. Gave us Christianity, gave us paganism. because we are the ones who he manifested himself unto. We are the priests of the Most High as a nation, kingdom of priests. Was this confirmed? Now, when Solomon, this is 7:1. This is 2 Chronicles 7:1. Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. Right? So it was confirmed. The Lord told you, yes, okay, that's fine. When you turn back to me, I'll redeem you. He says in verse 12, and the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and have chosen this place to myself for an house of sacrifice. Because again, Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem. It says, if I shut up heaven that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, if I send pestilence among my people, because that was other things he talked about that would take place, or if we go into captivity. He said, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. That is the solution for our people, to go back to God. That's our solution. And that's what Daniel was trying to, he even in another place, we didn't read it, in a place where he acknowledged his sin. Or rather, the sin of our people. But we read where he would pray 3 times a day. Why was he praying towards Jerusalem? Because he was in captivity. He had experienced what Solomon was talking about. If we are carried away captive, he was in the Babylonian captivity, right? So that's what he was praying. That's what he was praying. So let's go. Let's go. If you want to know, like, his confession and prayer, you can read in Daniel 9 and start at verse 3. But I need to wrap this up because again, I could go on forever. Let's see. This is Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy 4, because it's all, we need to turn back to God, and we are going to turn back to him as a people. He's going to redeem us as a people, and he's going to regather us. And we're going to go back home. You ever notice you never been back home? You're just we're supposed to dwell in this captivity forever? No, not forever. This is Moses. So it told us what was going to happen to us as a people even before we went in the promised land. Deuteronomy 4:26, he says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that ye shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto ye go over Jordan to possess it. So he said, hey, you're not even in the promised land yet, but you're going to perish off from it. He says, ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And that's how we are. To this day, we are destroyed people. Verse 27, and the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen. And that's how we are. We're surrounded by heathen. Heathen are people who don't know God. But our forefathers, our people, were the people who God manifested himself unto. The only people on the earth. Only you have I known of all the nations of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquity, that we be punished. So it said, whither the Lord shall lead thee. He says, and there ye shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. You knew the true and living God, but now you're bowing down to some statue. That's how we are. He says something in verse 29, though. But if from thence, or there, thou shalt seek the Lord thy God. See, on an individual level, it's happening now. Many of our people are seeking him. I want to see God and the Lord is manifesting himself through this word, telling you who you are and what you need to do. Because he's told them from the beginning. But as a nation, this is what we need to do. So he said, but if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find him. If thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul, when thou art in tribulation, and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days. We living in the latter days. If thou turn to the Lord thy God and shalt be obedient unto his voice. For the Lord thy God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them, because he made a covenant with our forefathers that we broke, but he didn't. He didn't. So that's what we need to do. And that's what's going to happen, brothers and sisters. This is going to happen. So I'm talking about what we need to do, but I'm about to read right here what's actually going to happen. This is Deuteronomy 30, verse 1. It says, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse. See, this curse is about to be over for us. It said, the blessing and the curse, which I have said before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. We're starting to call it to mind, brothers and sisters. And shalt return unto the Lord thy God, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, talking about on the earth, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. See, so I just told you the solution of what we need to do as a people, and I'm telling you also that's what's going to happen. So the solution is not going to get educated. We need more education. Yeah, you need to read a book, but ultimately this is the book you need to read. Because this is wisdom. You want wisdom, ask of God, not your professor. It's not an economic, the problem is not we need more economic empowerment. No, those are all symptoms of a spiritual problem. It's not political. You need a black face in office. You had a so-called man of color. Well, he was a man of color, but he's not one of, he's a Kenyan, let's put it like that. He's not one of our people. He's not a descendant of the diaspora. He'll tell you that. His wife is, he's not. And you about to feel the backlash of that soon enough. We are in a time of Reconstruction 2.0. I keep telling people that. Read about what happened during the time of Reconstruction. 1865 to 1877. The time right after Reconstruction. Terrorism of black people. That's what's about to happen right now. That's what's happening, if you haven't noticed. That's what's happening in the country. This pent up aggression that many of the dominant population have against black people. They want their country back. They kill it, man. Why you think you don't notice well, you do notice it, but you don't know what it derives from. It's a pent up aggression because they want to go back to the good old days. They can call you the N-word. But see, that's all pent up because people are acting like they're politically correct. They're acting like they believe everybody's equal. But let me tell you something. Look at, if you think, and you know what I'm talking about, if you are on YouTube at all, or on the internet at all, it could be after newspaper articles in the Huffington Post or the Washington Times. Look at the racist stuff that people are saying anonymously. They can hide behind the keyboard and be racist all they want to. Look at the stuff on YouTube. Look at that stuff. What they say to that man and was it a man or woman? I can't recall at the last Trump rally. Let's burn this MF alive. Why is this 1870? Is this 1915 to 2015? Why is Trump is speaking to what a lot of white folks are feeling. They feel that they're losing their position. They're feeling that you are a problem. And what happens to a people who are disposable in America? They are destroyed. If you are seen to be disposable, see, you got all kind of programs right now. The homosexual agenda is a program to destroy black people, largely. Not just black people here, any black people. And that's why many of these countries in Africa are saying we're not getting it with that program. The leaders of those countries. What did Mugabe say in front of the United Nations? We are not gays. That's what he said. We are not gays. He said that's not a part of our culture. But that's to destroy black people. Abortion. That's a lot of that is to destroy black people. Mass incarceration. destruction of black people. One program after another. But we need to, if we want to solve all our problems, because our problems are rooted in the spiritual. We have a spiritual problem, and it's being manifested in this physical, right? We've sinned against our God. We need to acknowledge our sin as a people, turn back to him with all our heart, pray toward Jerusalem as a nation, acknowledging our sin, acknowledging that we turn back to him. We need a straight up reformation, a total reformation. And we need to come out of this place, eventually physically, but spiritually speaking. Because, brothers and sisters, this country, this world is headed for destruction because of its moral decadence. The Lord is coming back in wrath, and he's going to redeem his people. The question is, what side are you going to be on? Brothers and sisters, understand what the solution is. It's already been written what's going to happen. I want to thank you for your time. Also want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to look out for this book. It's called Hair Like Wool, Feet Like Burned Brass. The Color of Jesus and Burning Truths Concerning the Messiah. And here in this book, you'll see, I don't know if you can see it from here, but you'll see some archaeological evidence showing what the original Israelites look like, the true Israelites. I don't know if you can see that. Another. You see what they look like. I'll show you some other pictures in here. See the images of Jesus in the catacombs of Italy. He's depicted as a black man. Not just him. Well, here's one in Ethiopia. Here's a picture of a black Madonna. And again, these are pictures of these black Madonnas, images of, and again, they shouldn't make these images. They shouldn't have been made, but they are black images of the Messiah. And I'm showing you that not so they could be worshipped, but rather the history of, again, Noah, black, Abraham, black. These are all in the Italian catacombs. Samson, I don't know if you can see that, a black man. This is before, you had these white lines painted by people like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. So this book, and it also deals with the color of the ancient Egyptians as well, because many of our people were mistaken for Egyptians. You had Joseph, you had Moses, and you had Paul, all mistaken for Egyptians. You had the Messiah, the Christ, go into Egypt. That's because he looked, and that family looked the same way. Our people looked the same as the Egyptians and the Ethiopians, for that matter. So this is what, this is just what the original Egyptians look like. Okay, even the Sphinx, and it's still, a sketch of it when he still had a nose on it. So this book just doesn't talk about the color of Jesus. It talks about the appearance of the ancient Israelites. It talks about the name controversy, dealing with the name Jesus or Yeshua or Yehoshua. It talks about Jesus, what he was, or the Messiah, what he was before he came in the flesh, that he was the creator of the worlds. It shows you how he is the Passover. It shows you how he is the first fruits in chapter 7, It shows you how he is our atonement, how he is a prophet like unto Moses, how he is a high priest after the order of Melchizedek, how he is King of Kings, and he's going to be king over this world and take it over and reign right in Jerusalem, the city of the great king. Also talks about the historicity of Jesus Christ or the Messiah, because you have many people who claim that he never existed, and it's a myth. And I basically kill that argument. So again, this is a book. It'll be on Amazon.com in a few days, in probably about 5 days, 3 to 5 days. It'll be available on Amazon.com. You can also go to ElishaJisrael.com and get this book. Okay. There are other books. You can also buy this Into Egypt Again with Ships, a message to the forgotten Israelites, African Americans. And I just want to say, I want to thank all those who have purchased that book. I've sold roughly 7,000 of those books with basically no marketing. And that's, that's something that, and the feedback that I've gotten from it. If you go and look, for example, if you go in this book, if you go to just Amazon and look at some of the feedback, you'll know whether or not it's quality or not. You'll know whether or not it's quality or not. This is another book, Killing Black Innocents, the program to control African American reproduction from slavery's end to the present day self-inflicted genocide. And, this book was basically written because it was just on my conscience to speak about what we've experienced as a people, in particular, this death culture of abortion, and this killing of our babies, and they dying, our most vulnerable are dying. So I felt like it was a moral obligation to at least try to sound the alarm on what's happening and with abortion, and what's happening to our people, and how this is one of the most terrible programs to destroy Black people. And you got ministers and Black politicians on board with it, all in the Democratic Party, And I'm not saying the Republican Party is any better. I'm not, because they want to kill Black people when they get, or put them in prison, or austerity measures and cut all kind of benefits once they get out the womb. So they don't love Black people. Again, your salvation is not in the GOP or in the Democratic Party or in the Green Party or any other party. You need to get with God's program. This book, I don't know if you can see it, The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays. Okay, and this book just deals with, this is a basic book in regard to where all the Christian holidays originated from. The holidays of Christianity, brothers and sisters. It's no coincidence you can't find them in the scriptures. So I just want to read some of the titles. And if you go to ElishaJisrael.com, soon I'm gonna put up some chapters where you can hear the audio of those books, maybe a chapter or so. I haven't done that yet, but that's something I'm going to do soon. So it says the first chapter is on Sunday, day of the S-U-N, not the S-O-N. It talks about the history of Sunday worship and shows you how it was the Catholic Church implemented it, but it was because sun worshipers, that's what they did. That's what they did, sun worshipers. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if you can see that at all, but as I say, this is Napoleon Bonaparte there. It says, if I had to choose a religion, the sun is the universal giver of life. The sun as the universal giver of life would be my God. That's Napoleon. Okay. So it just talks about that. And it talks about how the Catholic Church basically put that forth, and how from them, all these Protestant churches, the Catholic Church is the mother whore. She has all these harlots running around here. January 1st, and where that came from. That came from the veneration and celebration of the God of new beginnings, Janus. We talk about Valentine's Day and how that derived from the Lupercalia festival, right? Where Carnival came from, and Lent, and Easter or Ishtar, or Astarte or Asturth, where the Trinity came from, where Corpus Christi came, or the eating of the God, right? Where Halloween, the Celtic New Year's sowing, the season of Advent, the coming of the pagan God, December 25th, a son is born, S-U-N, shining the light on Epiphany, feast in honor of the Queen of Heaven. So that's just some of the things that it talks about. You know, it even breaks down how you got this old Saint Nick, right? Breaks down the Saturnalia, the Brumalia, and Mithraism. You know, you got this movie. I found that's fun. I said, man, I wrote this book a couple years ago, and now they got a movie about Krampus, right? Because that didn't just come up. That was something they used to do back in the day. Scare little kids with the Krampus. Dress up like a Krampus and scare the kids into trying to be good. Man, what you need? You need to leave that foolishness alone. Talk about where the Trinity came from, and the Egyptian Trinity, and the Indian Trinity. There's even a Babylonian Trinity. Council of Nicaea. Yes. Talks about the origin of Easter eggs and hairs and where they are, and new clothing and Easter lilies, hot cross buns, Easter hams, Easter fire, Sunday worship, Ash Wednesday, the origin of Easter, the sexual rituals in honor of Ishtar. That's Ishtar. See, that's what people are worshiping. Tammuz talks about Ash Wednesday and Lent, right? It connects it to what was going on in Babylon. The procession in honor of Isis and Mardi Gras, Carnival. You see? All pagan. All pagan. All pagan. Sol Invictus, Constantine, who was big, who was a key figure in the intermingling of paganism with, you know, because they did have some in the early 1st and 2nd century who were true, or tried to true as they knew it, to the scriptures. And they were European. People don't, you know, we don't, as you know, man, our people don't want to, we don't want to acknowledge that, but that was true. For example, Timothy, his mama was a Greek. His mama was a Jewess. She was an Israelite, but his father was a Greek. You are what your father is. So he was a Gentile. You know, like Bob Marley was a Gentile. Father was white. So, you know, ultimately, though, if you want to, and I'm getting off into something else, but if you want to accept God, your color don't matter. Your color don't matter. I know we want to believe that, but I can show you that all through the scriptures that's not the case. So that's just something on the solution. And I encourage you again to get these books. Get these books, Killing Black Innocents, Enter Egypt Again with Ships, Pagan Origin of Christian Holidays, and this newest one, Hair Like Wool, Feet Like Burned Brass, The Color of Jesus and Burning Truths Concerning the Messiah. Again, they all on Amazon. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I'll see you again in a couple of days, probably Wednesday, about 10 o'clock. I want to thank you for your time. God bless you.